Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jackson here from Titanic Games. In this tutorial, we're going to continue on with our survival game series, and we're going to get started setting up our drag and drop operations for our inventory. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing we're going to do is come into our UI folder here, and we're going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this drag drop. And essentially what we're going to store in this folder is only a specific class that's created. It's already created inside of Unreal Engine for drag and drop operations. So for that, we'll right click, go to Blueprint Class, and inside this All Classes panel, all you have to do is click the drop down. We're going to search for drag drop operation. So go ahead and select that. And we're going to call it BP underscore drag item. Open this up, and this is all it's going to look like, right? It's just an empty graph here, no functions in it. There are some overridable functions, you can add variables, dispatchers, macros, etc. But basically, we're not going to do anything with it yet. Okay, we're going to leave it as it is. Later on, we will come in and add some more, add some specific variables that will help us when doing like the dropping portion of it. But for right now, we just need this class here. Okay, so with that done, what we'll do is come into our widget here, or our widgets folder, and we're going to create a new widget. And this new widget we're going to create is going to be the kind of the visual representation of whatever item we're dragging. Okay, so we'll right click, go to user interface, create a widget blueprint, and we'll call it widget underscore I'm just going to say invent item image. Okay, or I guess we could have called it just like drag drop image or something, but either way is fine. So in here, all we're going to do, I'm just going to delete that canvas panel, and instead I'm going to add a size box. Okay, we'll drag that right there, and we want to set it to be the same size as the kind of the size that we have here for our overlay, which, if I recall, yeah, so we want to set it to about 100 by 100. Okay, so we'll come to our size box, go to width and height override, set it to 100 by 100. All right, and then all we're going to do is simply add an image into the size box there. So we'll drop that in. We'll rename this to item image. Okay, we'll go ahead and compile that, and we're going to come into the graph really quick because we do need to set up just one little part here. Let's go ahead and delete this event tick, but we do need the event construct, and what we're going to do is add a new variable, simply call this image, and we're going to change this to a texture. Yeah, can't spell today. Texture 2D. Okay, so we just want this texture 2D reference. We're going to make it editable and expose it on spawn. Now that part is important because we're not going to like call any functions or anything to set it after we've initially created it. We're just going to be able to to set this image upon calling create widget or whatever. So what we'll do is take our image here, and we first want to make sure it's valid so that we don't try to do anything with it that we can't do. Okay, and then if it's valid, we are going to take our item image here, we're going to get it, and we're going to say set brush from texture. So we'll hook this up, take the image, plug it in for the texture. Okay, and now if it's not valid, then we're simply going to take our item image and say set brush from texture. Okay, and we're going to set it to our placeholder empty. Okay, and if you recall, we have all these images from a couple videos ago where I provided a link that you can download various placeholder images that we are using in our project. Okay, so just to kind of recap really quick what this is doing, basically image is being set upon upon creating the widget. So when event construct runs, it should already be set, so it should execute is valid, and then our item image here, this image itself, the image in the brush will get set to whatever this variable is set to. Okay, otherwise it'll be set to just a default, and this will kind of let you know that there's something wrong, basically. So that's all we're going to do for that. Now comes the fun stuff. So if you're not familiar with drag and drop operations at all, this will probably all be completely new to you, but it should hopefully help you to start learning some of the cool things you can do with widget blueprints in Unreal Engine. So what we'll do is come into our widget inventory slot, which is just located in our UI widgets folder, and in here we're going to come into the graph, and we are going to click this little override drop down, and we're going to search for the on mouse button down function. So what it's a little event here. What it says is the system calls this method to notify the widget that a mouse button was pressed within it. Okay, so we'll override that, and basically what it does is if you press any of the mouse buttons on your mouse, so be that the left mouse button, the right mouse button, the middle mouse button, it will generate that event, and then you can use that use the mouse event here to kind of check what key it was. So what we'll do specifically though for checking if it, for detecting drag, is we'll say detect drag if pressed. So plug this in, and for the drag key, we're just going to use the left mouse button for right now. So we'll take this, plug it in. That's all we have to do. So what this does is it will literally just, if the left mouse button has been pressed down over one of our inventory slot widgets, then it will detect a drag. Okay, so whenever detect drag gets detected, or whenever this function gets called, and there's actual drag detected, what it does is it calls the on drag detected function. So for that we're also going to override. So make sure you go to override on drag detected. Okay, so we just created that drag item drag drop operation, and that's going to come in handy here. So what we're going to do, well, I guess essentially the end goal here is we want to drag out, and we want to say create drag drop operation. There we go. So we can specify which one we want to create. So the one that we're going to create is our BP drag item. Okay. Then we'll take our return value here, plug this into operation, and this just literally returns whatever type of operation that you pass through. So now you see that we have a couple different things here. We have this tag here, which allows you to provide some extra metadata about it in case you want to use that. It has this payload, which is just an object reference. So basically, this drag drop operation can contain any object that you want it to contain, and that's really handy because we're going to literally pass through this slot itself so that any of the variables on it we can easily access. Then you see we have this default drag visual, and this is the kind of visual representation of the drag, so you can see where it is that you're dragging, and that's where that invent item image is going to come in handy. And then you'll see we have this pivot. Now what this pivot is, basically it tells the drag visual where where to kind of position itself. So you can, if you click the drop down, you can see you have a whole bunch of different options here. If you choose center, then it will center the widget based on where the mouse is, right? If you choose top left, it will position it so that the entire, so say my mouse is right here, it'll position it so that the image goes kind of like down here, right? So you can play around with that to get what you like, but I'm just going to go with center. Okay, so that's kind of just it's a really brief explanation there of the drag and drop kind of stuff, but it should start to make more sense as we get familiar with it here. So what we're going to do is first we're going to take our inventory item here. We're going to say get, and well, I guess I'm missing one brief step. So for the drag visual itself, what we're going to do is drag out and say create widget. Now the widget that we want to create is that widget inventory item image. So and if you recall, we exposed this image variable on spawn. So for that, we're going to drag out from our inventory item, say get item info. Okay, from here we can right click and split this struct, and we can use this image, plug it in like so. Okay, now from the return value, we're going to take this and plug it into default drag visual. Okay, and then for payload, we'll drag out and say self, and that will pass through just our self, right? This object itself. So we'll go ahead and close these functions now. Now the last piece of this puzzle is, so basically we've, on mouse button down, we check if, we've detected, I guess I probably shouldn't have closed these, that's my bad. On mouse button down, we detect if a drag has been, has occurred. Okay, if it has, then on drag detected happens. Okay, so now, this is assuming that we're currently dragging something around the screen. Now, whenever we let go of whatever mouse button we use to detect the drag, it will drop it. Okay, and if a widget is set up to handle on drop, any kind of drop event, then you can react to it. So we'll override one more function. Go to override and we'll say override on drop. So here's that function, and now you'll see it has an operation with it. And in on drag detected, that operation is going to be this drag item. So we're basically just going to kind of do the reverse here. We're going to, kind of take the operation, cast it to this drag item, and then get the payload from our drag item, cast it to the self, and then from that we can do, fun stuff. Okay, so what we'll do first, I'm just going to break this link, leave it here, because it's going to get a little long. We'll take our operation, we'll say cast to BP drag item. It should be the only thing. Okay. Now from here, we'll say get payload. And then we'll cast to our widget inventory slot. Now this should succeed, right? Because we know that we're detecting that and we're passing through this widget slot itself as the payload. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is, I guess what I'll do first is I'll work it all out, and then we'll go through and I'll explain what's going on, just to avoid any confusion while doing it. So basically we're going to take our inventory slot here. Before we do that, we're going to take this slot type, we're going to get it, and we want to check if it's equal to inventory. Okay, so we'll do a branch. And I guess kind of the reason we want to check if it's equal to the inventory is because, when it comes to handling these other situations like the equipment and the hotbar, we will end up calling different functions. So we're going to have different implementations for those, which is kind of why we created this inventory slot to be a base class. Okay, because we're going to have other slots that override this on drop function and implement it differently. So we just want to make sure that this is indeed an inventory type. Okay, because if it is, what we'll do is we'll take this item itself. Okay, the item that has been dropped onto. Okay, so not the item that we're dropping, the item that is currently underneath that is being dropped onto. Okay, we want to take that item's inventory component. We'll drag out, and we're going to call swap items on it. Okay, now we're going to provide the from inventory. We're going to use this inventory component as the from inventory. Then the from index here is going to be this index of our item itself. Now the to inventory and the to index are going to come from this, the payload from our drag and drop operation. So we'll take this, we'll drag out, we'll say get inventory component. Plug that into to inventory. We can actually create a little reroute node here so we don't have to drag out again. And we'll say get index, plug that in, and there we go. Oops, that was my bad. We don't need that. I don't know what I just did there. So that's all we need for the swap items function. So this is handling, just the data side of things. Okay, nothing visual has happened yet. There's been, we haven't updated the UI to reflect these changes, so we need to do that next. And you see when I hit compile here, it's complaining because it's like, there's a different signature declared for it. So we just need to plug in all these like cast faileds. So plug these in, and we'll say, return false, like, so it wasn't a successful on drop. Do the same over here. And this last one here will end with a true. But we do have one more thing to add. So in this same class, we're going to create another function, and we're going to call this, swap widgets. So, the swap item function is swapping the, the items itself, like the data, but the swap widgets is going to kind of redo the UI part of it for us. Okay, so for this, we're going to add two parameters. Well, this first one, we're going to choose the widget inventory. Oops, my keyboard crapped out there for a second. Widget inventory slot. Okay, so we want the widget inventory slot, and we'll just call this, let's call it first, or excuse me, let's call it from widget. Then we'll add another one, and we'll just call it to widget. So they should both be that widget inventory slot. So now from here, what we'll do is drag out and say get inventory item. Okay, and we're going to promote this to a local variable, like so. And we'll call this L underscore just temp item. So this is kind of similar to how we transferred the data from the the previous from the the swap items function. We're creating a temporary variable there, and from here we're going to say get index. We're going to right click, promote that to a local variable, call it L temp index, hook this up. Okay, so we have our temporary variables stored. Now, admittedly, you could probably just store this whole thing as a temporary variable, and then switch them that way. But this is just making it more clear specifically what we're switching here. Okay, so now from the to widget, what we'll do is, here's what we'll do first. We'll take our from widget and we'll drag out and we'll say set inventory item. Okay, so we've already saved it, so now it's it's fine for us to set it to something else. I don't know why this isn't hooking. There we go. So it's fine for us to set it to something else. So we'll set it to something else, and we'll also set the index to something else as well. And as you might have been able to guess, based on the previous swap items function, we are going to use the item from the to plug it into the old from. Okay, so let's say get index, plug this in. All right, so we're going to do that, and then immediately after doing that, we're going to say set style. And if you recall, set style updates the widget inventory slot based on information from the item. So by passing through the information from the to widget into the from widget will now update to reflect whatever the to widget was. Okay, so basically all we have to do now is just do the the swap for the other side of it. So set inventory item here, plug that in. Okay, and we'll take our temp item, plug him in, and then say set index, plug that in. We'll set it to the temporary index, like so, and then finally just call set style on that to widget. And there we go. That's all we have to do. Now I'm just going to go ahead and pause the video here, tidy it up a little bit, and then do one final little walkthrough. Okay, so you should look something a little more presentable, I guess. If you're like me and don't like all the wires just being crisscrossed everywhere, but either whether or not you reorganize it or not is completely up to you. So anyways, just a final little run through here. So the from widget, right, we're saving its kind of information that we care about anyways to 2 temporary variables, and then immediately we're kind of overriding that, overriding its old stuff with the 2 widgets information, okay? And then with it overridden, we call set style, which set style updates kind of the the amount text and the item info, the brush, the image itself, based on the information in our item. Okay, so then we just do the same thing over here. We swap out the 2 widgets old data with the temporary variable data that we saved here, and then also call set style. So let's come into on drop now. We can call that function. We'll pop him in, hook it up. Now we just need to use the correct widgets here. So the the from widget is going to be self, I guess, and then the to widget is going to be this guy. So we'll drag him out and we'll say get, or actually, excuse me, we don't have to do that. We can just plug it straight in because it's the widget itself that we're passing through. We'll just add a little reroute node there because that's just the way I am. And there we go. So it should now all work really nicely. So to go through this really quick and just explain finally, so we're taking the operation here from our drop, right? Which, if you recall, from on drag detected, it happens whenever we press the left mouse button down, it detects the drag, and we create this default drag visual. We pass through this widget itself as the payload, and then use that as the operation, and then we just work backwards, right? We cast to the drag item so we can get the payload, and then make sure that that payload is an inventory slot, and then from there we can access whatever information we want. So first we verify that we're in the inventory, okay, or that we're dragging and dropping onto something from an inventory, because the way we perform this swap item, we don't have to worry about any kind of nuances that might occur like with an equipment slot, I guess, or a hotbar slot, right? Those are handled in different ways, so we can just freely call swap items, which the from inventory and the from index it takes from this widget itself, and then the to inventory and to index is the item that we're dropping onto. So and then finally we perform the visual part of it. Okay, so this was just the data. Now we're performing the visual part of it and updating everything accordingly. So we return true at the end of that, and now everything should work just beautifully. So let's go ahead and try this out. If we hit play, go ahead and pick up our apples. We can hit I. You can see here's our apple. If we click the left mouse button down, you can see that we're now dragging our inventory item image around. Okay, and whenever we drop it onto an inventory slot, you'll see that it updates. So it just replaced this old one with empty, and this item itself is actually an empty slot now. It's not just visually empty, it is empty. And then our apple is now moved to that third position, which is the second index, I guess, technically, or index number 2. And you'll also notice that the amount transferred with it. So the final test is just making sure that it wasn't only a visual change and that it was actual data change in our inventory component. So to test that, we just hit I and then hit it again, and you'll see that it's still in the same position. So there we go. So you can see we have our drag and drop stuff working around, or yeah, starting to work now. In the next video, we'll go ahead and add some more items so that we can play around with this a little more and actually see that if say you had an axe here and you dragged it and swapped it, both of them would swap just fine. So and I guess the last thing, if you drag off, right, and drop, since this is technically a widget, right, this canvas, it doesn't have the on drop function, so it doesn't handle it. It just kind of says nope, nothing happened, that's fine. So yeah, so there you go, there you have it. Kind of a really long video, I know. So yeah, I hope it all made sense. If you have any questions about the drag and drop stuff, feel free to leave a comment down below. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you like it, like or subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.